Welcome to Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and today we're exploring one of the most profound discoveries in developmental psychology: how the quality of our earliest relationships literally determines our capacity to connect with others, bounce back from adversity, and develop a moral compass that guides us through life. What we're going to uncover today goes far beyond the simple idea that loving parents raise loving children. We're going to explore the actual mechanisms, psychological, neurological, and social, through which secure attachment in our earliest years creates the foundation for everything from self esteem to empathy, from resilience to morality. And perhaps most remarkably, we'll discover how these early experiences create patterns that can persist across generations, while also learning that healing and growth remain possible throughout our lives. Let me begin with something that might fundamentally shift how you think about human development. When we look at children who've experienced secure attachment in their early years, compared to those with insecure, anxious, or disorganized attachments, the differences are staggering. Securely attached children demonstrate advantages in self esteem, relationships with caregivers, friendships with peers, ability to control impulses and emotions, cooperation and compassion, independence and autonomy, and positive core beliefs about themselves and the world. But here's what's crucial to understand: these aren't just personality differences or learned behaviors that can be easily changed. These differences reflect fundamental variations in how the brain develops, how the nervous system regulates itself, and how the child constructs their understanding of self, others, and the world. The attachment relationship literally shapes the architecture of the developing mind. Let's start with the development of self. The emergence of an autonomous sense of self is fundamentally linked to attachment. The patterns that develop from the infant caregiver relationship directly affect the child's emerging sense of who they are. When children experience a secure base with an appropriately responsive and available caregiver, something remarkable happens. They become more autonomous and independent as they develop, not less. This might seem counterintuitive. You might think that children who receive consistent gratification of their needs would become spoiled and dependent. But research shows the opposite. Children who experience reliable, sensitive, attuned caregiving learn to trust. This secure attachment becomes the foundation for a positive sense of self and a template for all future relationships. They're able to explore their environment with more confidence and less anxiety, resulting in enhanced self esteem, feelings of mastery, and healthy differentiation of self from others. Now, let's talk about something called internal state language. By 28 months of age, most children can use words to label their perceptions, physical states, and feelings: happy, sad, hungry, tired. This might seem like simple vocabulary development, but it's actually profound. These internal state words reflect the child's developing sense of self as distinct from others. They also promote behavioral and emotional self control. A child who can say, "I'm angry," is less likely to hit. A child who can identify, "I'm scared," can seek comfort rather than withdrawing or acting out. But children with attachment disorders show significant deficits in this area. They're often not aware of their thoughts, feelings, or levels of physiological arousal. There are two reasons for this. First, there's a lack of modeling in their environment. Their caregivers don't commonly discuss feelings in sensible, meaningful ways. How can a child learn to identify and express emotions when their caregiver is emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or hostile? Second, and perhaps more heartbreaking, not knowing and expressing feelings becomes a self protective strategy for these children. The goal is to avoid further emotional pain and negativity by withholding information. If expressing needs or feelings has historically led to rejection, punishment, or being ignored, the child learns to suppress awareness of these internal states. These children often present as superficially charming and engaging, or they might be compulsively compliant. They'll passively and falsely comply rather than express their true feelings and needs. But there's a devastating price to pay for this adaptation. By repeatedly avoiding awareness and expression of thoughts and emotions, their sense of self becomes both underdeveloped and damaged. What remains is what psychologists call a false self, a facade that hides their true feelings and needs. As years pass, their self esteem diminishes further. They become less confident, more impulsive, more distractible, and increasingly unhappy. The false self that protected them in an unsafe early environment becomes a prison that prevents authentic connection and self development. Now we need to explore one of the most important concepts in attachment theory, the internal working model. First described by John Bowlby, this is the cognitive representation of early attachment relationships. Based on their attachment patterns with primary caregivers, children develop beliefs and expectations about themselves, others, and life in general. For securely attached children, the internal working model sounds like this: I am good, wanted, worthwhile, competent, lovable. My caregivers are appropriately responsive to my needs, sensitive, caring, trustworthy. The world is safe, life is worth living. But for insecurely attached children, the internal working model is devastatingly different. I am bad, unwanted, worthless, helpless, unlovable. Caregivers are unresponsive to my needs, insensitive, hurtful, untrustworthy. The world is unsafe, life is not worth living. These aren't just thoughts or attitudes that can be easily changed with positive thinking. These core beliefs operate outside conscious awareness and become the lens through which the child interprets every experience. The internal working model affects how the child interprets events, stores information in memory, and perceives social situations. Let me give you an example of how profoundly this shapes experience. Two children are on a playground. Another child refuses to play with them. The child with a positive internal working model might interpret this as a minor slight. Maybe that child is having a bad day or already promised to play with someone else. They readily approach another potential playmate. But the child with a negative internal working model interprets the same refusal as devastating rejection and evidence of personal unworthiness. They might sulk, have an angry outburst, or withdraw entirely. Same event, completely different interpretation and response, all filtered through the lens of their internal working model. The internal working model of children with disrupted attachment includes negative self evaluations and self contempt. Children internalize the lack of adequate care, love, and protection as self blame. They perceive themselves as unlovable, helpless, and somehow responsible for the maltreatment they've experienced. The negative messages communicated to the child, as well as the child's interpretation of these experiences, become part of their self image. Research reveals something particularly troubling. This framework of negativity results in misinterpretation of social cues, including the tendency to attribute hostile intentions to others, even when none exist. The child with attachment disorder is conditioned to perceive threat and hostility everywhere. They commonly respond with aggressive and coercive behavior, showing a lack of empathy for others in distress. This creates a vicious cycle. Their aggressive responses result in ongoing conflict and alienation from peers and others, which further damages self esteem and confirms their negative beliefs about themselves and others. This leads to increasingly aggressive and antisocial behaviors as they grow. Modifying these negative working models is a major goal of therapy, but it's extremely difficult. These core beliefs become fixed and rigid. They operate outside conscious awareness and don't often change simply by modifying the child's environment. Placing such a child in a loving foster or adoptive home may actually exacerbate the problem initially. The child will push the love away due to lack of trust, expectation of maltreatment, and an unconscious attempt to recreate familiar negative patterns. They impose their negative working model on everyone: therapists, teachers, foster and adoptive parents, siblings, and eventually romantic partners in adulthood. Now let's explore how secure attachment promotes the development of empathy and morality. This connection goes back to our evolutionary history. As humans evolved from isolated gatherers to cooperative hunter gatherers, small tribes and communities could only survive if people helped one another. Considering the wants and needs of others became essential for survival. Sharing with the young, weak, and vulnerable made us more altruistic. This altruism became reciprocal, forming the evolutionary basis for what we call good behavior. But how does this translate to individual development? Cooperation, caring, and empathy are learned in the secure attachment relationship. Secure attachment leads to healthy psychosocial development and serves as a protective factor against the development of antisocial behavior. It's associated with fostering crucial prosocial values, attitudes, and behaviors: empathy, caring, compassion, kindness, and morality. Morality involves both the tendency to accept and follow rules that regulate interpersonal behavior and feelings of obligation to foster the welfare of others. This is acquired remarkably early in life. The earliest signs of obedience appear in the last quarter of the baby's first year. Simple compliance to commands like "come here" or "no, don't do that." Between 18 and 26 months, toddlers learn to be sensitive to adult standards, understanding about property, not harming others, cleanliness. They increase their ability to meet these standards. By their third and fourth years, children can distinguish conventional rules from moral issues. They understand that addressing a teacher by the wrong name is different from bullying another child. They're increasingly willing to offer help to others. The family is most influential in the child's social and moral development because it provides the initial learning environment. Through learning and identification in early attachment relationships, children acquire both the content of their parents' moral code and a willingness to act in accordance with those rules. When families don't promote secure attachment and appropriate socialization through abuse, neglect, or multiple placements, children are at risk of developing not only conduct disorders, but a more pervasive lack of morality. How exactly does secure attachment promote empathy and moral development? There are four key psychological processes at work. First is modeling. Simply stated, empathic parents rear empathic children. Research shows that children display signs of empathy as young as 1 year old, and by age 2 show concern for peers in distress. Children with secure attachment histories are more caring toward peers and more likely to be sought out as playmates by age 3.5. By ages 4 and 5, securely attached children are more caring and compassionate with the best friendships, while avoidantly attached children are often cruel, taking pleasure in others' distress. These patterns continue through adolescence and into adulthood. Parents who provide a balance of discipline, warmth, and positive experiences are more likely to rear empathic, cooperative children. 4 and 5-year-olds display more empathy when their mothers use reasoning to teach compassion and sensitivity. In contrast, children are less empathic when mothers use negative control practices like threats. Adults in their 30s who show empathy for others had parents who modeled empathic care both inside and outside the family when they were young. The modeling of empathy and altruism has lifelong effects. Studies of crisis counseling volunteers found that those most likely to break their commitment and leave quickly reported lower levels of parental altruism in their families of origin. Parents who model caring and empathy are most likely to have empathic children, and empathy is one of the building blocks of prosocial morality. But there's more to it than just imitation. Children behave in socially acceptable ways, even when it conflicts with self-interest, because of a powerful fear of losing their attachment figure's approval. The conscience serves as a mechanism motivating children to avoid negative responses from attachment figures. In early years, children comply with parental demands out of desire for approval and fear of disapproval, of losing love and affection. They reluctantly sacrifice their desires to feel safe and positively connected. The second process is internalization, learning standards of conduct, not merely obeying rules. This involves developing a moral inner voice. Secure attachment involves internalizing pro-social values and behaviors like caring, compassion, kindness, and fairness. Securely attached children develop an inner voice guiding them towards social behavior, providing self-control over selfish and aggressive impulses. Children with relational trauma often internalize antisocial standards, selfishness, violence, sadistic power and control, dishonesty. Their inner voice, based on lack of trust and prior maltreatment, doesn't provide a viable conscience or feelings of remorse. During a child's first years, internalization is based on compliance, the desire to please parents and distress when parents are unhappy. This initial disposition toward compliance is critical for later development and is lacking in children with attachment disorder due to their avoidant and fearful reactions to attachment figures. When true internalization occurs, children don't behave well only for rewards or to avoid punishment. They can judge their own behavior. Children with attachment disorder always need external structure because they haven't developed this ability. Additionally, securely attached children can express love for their parents by following their rules. I want to make you feel good because I care about you. You are good, therefore your rule must be good. Children with attachment disorder don't generally experience the trust and safety necessary to feel and express love, and are inclined to act out anger through oppositional and controlling behaviors. Children go through 5 predictable stages as they internalize parental values and develop conscience. At 12 to 27 months, the child thinks, I want it, I'll take it. Pure impulse with no thought to consequences. By ages 2 to 3, they think, I would take it, but my parents will be upset, beginning to consider consequences, but only when parents are present. At ages 3 to 5, children think, I would take it, but my parents will find out, showing causative thinking and weighing risks. By ages 6 to 7, the shift is profound. I would take it, but if my parents find out, they would be disappointed. Behavior is now influenced by internal control, caring about how others feel, wanting to do the right thing. Finally, by ages 8 to 11, internalization is complete. I want it, but don't feel good about doing things like that. The child's own moral values have developed based on attachment to parents and society, understanding not only self-interest, but the good of the group. The third aspect of how secure attachment fosters empathy and morality involves synchronicity and reciprocity, the way primary attachment figures are finely attuned to the infant's signals, needs, and emotions, and the ongoing give and take nature of the relationship. Children of sensitive, accepting, cooperative mothers show signs of internalizing prosocial standards and are more cooperative and self-controlled by age 2. The same qualities of parenting that foster secure attachment, sensitive, attuned, affectionate, consistently available caregiving, also encourage children to follow and internalize the parent's model. The child is in sync with the parent, learning to be aware of another person's feelings and needs. Secure attachment implies greater awareness of others' mental states, which produces more rapid and effective evolution of morality and protects against antisocial behavior. The fourth necessary psychological process is development of a solid sense of self. The route to caring for others always begins with a strong positive self-identity, with clear boundaries between self and others. During the second year, children typically become increasingly oppositional, the terrible twos, reflecting initial efforts at independence and autonomy. When there's a solid foundation of secure attachment, this transitional phase is managed and transcended without major negative consequences. The parent provides what's called a holding environment, a safe, secure context with healthy boundaries and support for appropriate self-control and emotional expression. The child with attachment disorder lacks this solid foundation and has a weak negative sense of self with blurred or violated boundaries. The negativity and defiance characteristic of the second year become pervasive and chronic. The child assumes a controlling, fearful, punitive orientation toward others. There's no room for empathy, compassion, or kindness when the child is fighting for psychological survival in a world perceived as threatening. Now, let me introduce you to one of the most exciting discoveries in neuroscience: mirror neurons. Discovered in the early 1990s, these have revolutionized our understanding of how people learn from and communicate with one another. Mirror neurons are networks in our brains that allow us to feel what others experience as if it were happening to us. Human brains have an intrinsic ability for imitation and can share mental processes and emotions. Brain cells fire not only when we perform an action, but also when observing someone else's behavior. When you watch a race, your heart rate increases with excitement as runners cross the finish line. When you see someone smell something disgusting and make a face, your own stomach might turn. When someone smiles at you, the same brain regions activate and neurochemicals release that would occur if you were smiling yourself. Humans begin life with a rudimentary mirror neuron system. Newborns can imitate mouth opening, tongue protrusion, lip pursing, finger movements, and facial expressions. The anterior insula, a brain region receiving input from the entire autonomic nervous system, responds identically when we experience disgust ourselves and when we observe others displaying disgust. Mirror neurons explain why we can read others' minds and have empathy and heartfelt compassion for their pain. Parents literally feel their child's pain as their own. Spouses feel their partner's distress. Our brains are built with the ability to understand one another at a neurological level. But here's what's crucial: this mirror neuron system develops and refines through early attachment relationships. Securely attached children who've experienced thousands of attuned interactions where their emotional states were accurately mirrored and responded to develop more sophisticated mirror neuron functioning. They become better at reading others, empathizing, and responding appropriately to social cues. Children with attachment disorders who've experienced misattuned, neglectful, or abusive caregiving may have underdeveloped or dysregulated mirror neuron systems. They struggle to accurately read others' emotions, to empathize, or to understand social situations. This neurological difference contributes to their social difficulties and antisocial behaviors. Now let's explore resilience, one of the most important concepts for understanding human development and recovery from trauma. Why do some individuals collapse under life's stresses while others cope well with the same conditions? Why do some maltreated children develop severe psychosocial difficulties while others with similar backgrounds mature into successful adults? Resilience refers to competence and successful adaptation following exposure to significant adversity and stressful life events. Vulnerability is susceptibility to negative developmental outcomes under high-risk conditions. We know certain factors place children at risk: poverty, family discord, violence, parental substance abuse or psychological disturbance, low educational levels, single parenthood, lack of family resources and support, perinatal health problems, congenital handicaps, or other biological and genetic deficiencies. But we've also identified protective factors that mediate the effects of adversity and promote resilience. Individual protective factors include cognitive skills, alertness, curiosity, enthusiasm, goal setting ability, high self esteem, internal locus of control, and easy temperament. Environmental protective factors include family community ties, parents who set rules while respecting the child's individuality, fostering secure attachment, and stable family environments. Here's what's remarkable. Studies consistently find that the most basic and important protective factor is the history of caregiver-child attachment. Secure attachments are a primary defense against developing severe psychopathology associated with adversity and trauma. In children exposed to early loss and stress, the quality of parent-child attachment is the most important determinant of long-term damage. Even when securely attached children deteriorate during school years due to extreme adversity, they're more likely to rebound later compared to children anxiously attached from early life. Secure attachment to secondary caregivers, extended family, fathers, mentors can help children overcome adversity, including anxious attachment with mothers. One of the largest investigations of resilience was Emmy Werner's 40-year longitudinal study. Following children who experienced perinatal stress, poverty, parental alcoholism, emotional problems, and family disruption, researchers found that 1/3 developed into caring, competent adults despite these challenges. Three types of protective factors were identified: dispositional attributes like sociability, intelligence, communication skills, and confidence; affectional ties within the family providing emotional support during stress; and external support systems at school, church, or community providing validation, support, and positive belief systems. The researchers emphasized that the developmental outcome of virtually every biological risk condition was dependent on the quality of the rearing environment. The most important ingredient in establishing a positive rearing environment is high quality interaction between parent and child, secure attachment. This has profound implications for intervention. Programs designed to improve parent infant interaction show remarkable results. Preterm, low birth weight infants receiving intervention had better cognitive development and improved interactions with parents. First grade children of depressed mothers had fewer behavior problems when high quality mother child interaction was fostered. Low income, at risk mothers and infants provided with education and support from pregnancy through 6 months improved their attachment relationships. While other factors contribute to resilience, temperament, external support systems, the development of high quality, stable, secure attachments in infancy and early childhood provides the crucial foundation for later adaptation, success, and health. Let's talk about something that might surprise you: post traumatic growth. While trauma has many negative effects, including PTSD, depression, medical conditions, and substance abuse, trauma can also result in positive outcomes. Many people experience increased personal strength, appreciation of life, emotional intimacy, creativity, spirituality, and expanded life possibilities following traumatic events. Several factors are associated with post traumatic growth and resilience. First is hope. Building hope is key in healing traumatized children and adults. Hope is linked to better physical and psychological health, academic and work performance, and recovery from trauma. Traumatic experiences shatter belief in a safe world and create a sense of foreshortened future. Hope empowers individuals to believe in the possibility of a brighter future. Envisioning a future worth living is essential to recovery. Second is meaning and purpose. Trauma affects beliefs about self, world, and future, leading to negative mindsets. It's my fault. I'm helpless. People are bad. Helping people make sense of traumatic events and create meaning and purpose fosters resilience and growth by increasing optimism, positive emotions, and self esteem. Those who find meaning in traumatic events, even devastating losses, do better in recovery than those who don't. People who tell stories reflecting their ability to overcome adversity and discover positive results are better adjusted. Third is positive emotions. These activate biochemical changes in the brain, flooding it with dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, neurotransmitters stimulating the brain's reward system, associated with positive moods, motivation, pleasurable sensations, and enhanced cognitive abilities. People who experience positive emotions before traumatic events recover faster than their less positive counterparts. Optimism buffers against negative effects because it fosters active problem solving and constructive action. Fourth is social support, both received and perceived. Positive relationships provide connectedness, opportunities to experience life's healthful aspects, and reduce loneliness and worthlessness. They connect people to resources like therapists, physicians, and community services. Studies of trauma survivors consistently show that those with emotional support have fewer symptoms and faster recovery than those with less support. Fifth is acts of kindness. Giving support, not just receiving it, is tied to resilience and growth. Acts of altruism decrease stress and enhance mental health. Volunteering increases self efficacy. I can make a difference, enhances self worth, and heightens sense of meaning and purpose. Finally, internal locus of control. Individuals with strong ownership over their fate are more resilient than those viewing themselves as victims. People with internal locus of control believe they influence everything happening to them and are more apt to perceive trauma as something they can overcome. This belief in one's capability to produce desired effects through one's actions, self efficacy, leads to perseverance facing obstacles and challenges. Now we need to address cultural variations in attachment. Numerous studies show that about one-third of children in middle-class American families are insecurely attached, with higher percentages in low-income multi-problem families. Across all cultures studied using the same assessment procedures, results are similar. Most infants, 65 to 70%, show secure attachment, while the remainder show insecure attachment. But we must consider cultural norms and variations. Does Western developed assessment actually measure attachment security in other cultures? How do variations among the 1,300 human cultures on our planet influence attachment patterns? Which aspects are universal and which culture specific? Even with similar attachment patterns, cultural and community differences may result in different developmental implications. Studies comparing American and African cultures found many similarities. Two-thirds of babies securely attached in both populations, similar phases of attachment development, and importance of primary caregiver as attachment figure and secure base. But cultural differences were apparent. African babies were more distressed by brief separations, showed more fear of strangers, and didn't hug or kiss upon reunion. These differences reflect cultural variations in child-rearing practices and resultant differences in infant expectations. German studies found similar attachment patterns to American children, with securely attached children showing advantages by age 5, better social skills, ability to handle peer conflict, more likely to seek parents when distressed. However, there were fewer behavioral problems among anxiously attached German children compared to Americans. German mothers weren't rejecting. They cared deeply, but behaved according to cultural norms, valuing early self-reliance and independence. By age 10, however, avoidantly attached German children looked like American counterparts. More problems with peers, less confident, self-reliant, and resilient than securely attached children. The researchers concluded that merely behaving according to cultural norms doesn't necessarily spare children harm. This is a crucial point. Cultural practices aren't automatically beneficial just because they're traditional or widely accepted. Japanese studies found unusually high stress levels during separation, and not a single baby showing avoidant attachment, but many more in the anxious category than in America. Japanese children are socialized to maintain harmonious relationships. Avoidant behavior is considered rude. Traditional Japanese society rarely separates babies from mothers, encouraging close mother-child bonds throughout life. Israeli kibbutzim studies found higher percentages of anxious children, probably resulting from multiple mothering and inconsistent caregiving. Infants were monitored by hired caregivers during the day, spent only a few hours with parents, and were responded to slowly at night by caregivers responsible for many babies. These findings are consistent with attachment theory. Anxious attachment patterns relate to preoccupation with unavailable primary caregivers. Observations of Stone Age tribes where mothers carried infants everywhere, babies shared family beds, and were showered with love and attention, found that despite little training in obedience, children were well behaved, compliant, friendly, non aggressive, and grew to be self reliant, confident, caring community members. These practices align with basic attachment principles and are becoming more common in American culture today, such as parents carrying babies close in soft carriers, which promotes secure attachment. If attachment is instinctive and adaptive based on biology and evolution, then basic aspects should be universal across cultures, races, and ethnic groups. Evidence suggests there are universal attachment behaviors, but specific patterns vary by culture. Cultures valuing distal caregiving and early independence see more avoidant patterns. Cultures encouraging contact and closeness while avoiding separation see more contact seeking under stress. In the short term, forming insecure attachment, regardless of culture, is adaptive, a strategy for coping with unavailable or abusive caregivers. However, the consensus is that forming secure attachments early in life, keeping anger, anxiety, and defensiveness minimal, is the best formula for psychosocial well being in any culture. What does all this mean for us practically? First, it means that the foundations of empathy, morality, resilience, and self worth aren't taught through lectures or discipline alone. They're absorbed through thousands of micro interactions in the attachment relationship. Every time a caregiver accurately reads and responds to an infant's cues, they're building that child's capacity for empathy. Every consistent, loving response builds resilience. Every attuned interaction shapes the child's sense of self worth. Second, it tells us that children who seem lacking in empathy, who appear to have no conscience, who can't bounce back from setbacks, these children aren't bad or broken. They're operating from internal working models shaped by inadequate or traumatic early relationships. Their inability to empathize isn't a character flaw, it's a developmental injury. Third, it reveals why simply placing traumatized children in loving homes or teaching them social skills often isn't enough. If their internal working model tells them they're unlovable and others are dangerous, they'll interpret even loving gestures through this distorted lens. They need therapeutic experiences that can gradually update these deep seated beliefs. Fourth, it highlights the intergenerational nature of these patterns. Parents who experience secure attachment tend to provide it. Those who experienced insecure attachment often perpetuate it. But this isn't destiny. Awareness, intervention, and healing relationships can break these cycles. The research on mirror neurons adds another dimension to our understanding. When we recognize that our brains are literally wired to feel what others feel, we understand that empathy isn't just a nice idea, it's a fundamental human capacity. But this capacity must be developed through early experiences of having our own emotions accurately mirrored and responded to. The concept of post traumatic growth offers profound hope. It tells us that even severe early trauma doesn't determine our destiny. With the right support, meaning making, and healing relationships, people can not only recover but grow stronger. The factors that promote this growth, hope, meaning, positive emotions, social support, altruism, and internal locus of control, can be cultivated at any point in life. The cultural variations research reminds us to be humble about our assumptions. While secure attachment appears universally beneficial, the specific behaviors that create it vary across cultures. We must be careful not to impose Western middle class norms as the only path to healthy development, while recognizing that some practices, regardless of cultural tradition, can be harmful. For parents, this knowledge provides both guidance and reassurance. You don't need to be perfect. What children need is good enough, attunement, consistency, and repair when things go wrong. Your capacity to reflect on your own emotions, to see your child as a separate person with their own inner life, to respond sensitively to their cues, these are the building blocks of secure attachment. For those working with children, understanding these principles transforms how we interpret behavior. The aggressive child isn't choosing to be bad. They're operating from an internal working model that sees threat everywhere. The withdrawn child isn't shy. They've learned that expressing needs leads to rejection. The controlling child isn't manipulative, they're terrified of being vulnerable. This knowledge also highlights the critical importance of early intervention. The earlier we can support attachment relationships, the more we can influence the trajectory of development. Programs that help parents understand and respond to their baby's cues, that support the attachment relationship, that address parental trauma and stress. These aren't just nice additions to healthcare. They're investments in the fundamental architecture of human development. For adults who recognize their own attachment injuries in this discussion, there's important hope. While early experiences shape us profoundly, the brain's plasticity continues throughout life. New experiences of safe, attuned relationships, whether in therapy, friendship, or romantic partnership, can gradually update those old internal working models. The mirror neuron system can be activated and refined through positive relational experiences at any age. The concept of earned secure attachment is particularly powerful. Even those with difficult early experiences can develop secure attachment through healing relationships, therapy, and reflection. This earned security can be just as powerful as continuous security from birth. In fact, those who've done the work to earn secure attachment often have deep insight into relationship dynamics and great capacity for empathy with others' struggles. Understanding resilience factors helps us recognize what promotes recovery and growth. It's not just about reducing risk factors, it's about actively building protective factors. Every experience of successful coping, every supportive relationship, every opportunity to help others, every chance to make meaning from difficulty, these all contribute to resilience. The research on stages of conscience development helps us understand that morality isn't learned all at once. It develops gradually, with each stage building on the previous one. Children need to experience consistent, appropriate consequences for their actions, but even more importantly, they need to experience the joy of pleasing someone they love and trust. Without that attachment relationship, external rules remain external. They never become internalized as conscience. For educators, this knowledge reframes how we understand children's behavior and learning. The child who can't follow rules might not be defiant. They might never have internalized standards of conduct because they never had a trusting relationship with a rule giver. The child who shows no remorse might not be sociopathic. They might never have experienced the distress of disappointing someone they love. The mirror neuron research has implications for how we structure learning and therapeutic environments. Since we're literally wired to resonate with others' emotional states, the emotional climate of a classroom or therapy room matters profoundly. A calm, regulated adult can help regulate a dysregulated child through their mirror neuron system. An anxious, hostile adult will amplify the child's distress. Understanding cultural variations helps us work more effectively with diverse families. We need to understand each family's cultural context while also being willing to address practices that might be harmful regardless of cultural tradition. The goal isn't to impose one model of parenting, but to support secure attachment within each family's cultural framework. The research on post-traumatic growth reframes how we think about trauma and recovery. Instead of seeing trauma as inevitably damaging, we can recognize it as potentially transformative. This doesn't minimize the pain or suggest trauma is beneficial, but it does mean that with the right support, people can emerge from traumatic experiences with new strengths, deeper relationships, and expanded perspectives on life. For policymakers, this research provides clear direction. Investments in early childhood, parent support, and attachment based interventions aren't just social programs, they're investments in the basic psychological infrastructure of society. Every child who develops secure attachment is more likely to become an empathic, resilient, moral citizen. Every attachment injury that goes unaddressed potentially perpetuates cycles of dysfunction across generations. The stages of developing internal state language remind us that emotional literacy doesn't just happen. It's learned through thousands of interactions where feelings are named, validated, and responded to appropriately. When we help children identify and express their internal states, we're not just building vocabulary, we're building their sense of self, their capacity for self regulation, and their ability to connect with others. The research on internalization shows us why external rewards and punishments alone don't create moral behavior. True morality comes from identifying with loved and trusted attachment figures, wanting to please them, and eventually incorporating their values as our own. Without that attachment relationship, we might get compliance, but we don't get conscience. Understanding how synchronicity and reciprocity foster empathy helps us recognize that empathy isn't taught through lessons about being nice to others. It's developed through thousands of attuned interactions where the child experiences having their emotional states recognized and responded to. They learn to recognize others' emotional states because they've experienced having their own recognized. The role of positive self identity in developing empathy reminds us that we can't give what we don't have. Children who see themselves as bad, unworthy, or unlovable don't have the psychological resources to care about others' well being. Building a positive sense of self isn't about empty praise or boosting self esteem artificially. It's about providing experiences of being seen, valued, and delighted in within the attachment relationship. As we consider the full scope of this research, several key themes emerge. First, the profound interconnection between self and other. We develop our sense of self through early relationships, and our capacity to connect with others depends on how we've learned to see ourselves. The individual and the relational are inseparable. Second, the importance of the body and nervous system in attachment and development. This isn't just about thoughts and feelings, it's about how our entire biological system develops within the context of early relationships. The way our nervous system learns to regulate, the way our stress response system develops, the way our brain architecture forms. All of this happens through attachment relationships. Third, the both and nature of human development. We need both connection and autonomy, both safety and challenge, both consistency and flexibility. Secure attachment provides the foundation for healthy development, not by keeping children dependent, but by giving them the secure base from which to explore and develop independence. Fourth, the possibility of healing and growth throughout life. While early experiences are profoundly important, they're not destiny. The brain's plasticity, the possibility of earned secure attachment, the potential for post traumatic growth, these all speak to the human capacity for resilience and transformation. Finally, the fundamentally social nature of human beings. We're not isolated individuals who happen to form relationships. We're relational beings who develop our individuality through connections with others. Our capacity for empathy, morality, and resilience all emerge from the quality of our earliest relationships. This knowledge carries both hope and responsibility. Hope because we understand more than ever before about what children need for healthy development and how healing can occur even after severe early trauma. Responsibility because we can no longer claim ignorance about the profound importance of early relationships and the devastating effects of attachment disruption. For all of us, whether parents, professionals, or simply humans trying to understand ourselves and others better, this research offers profound insights. It shows us that love isn't just a feeling, it's the organizing principle of human development. The quality of our earliest relationships doesn't just affect how we feel, it shapes who we become at the most fundamental level. Understanding attachment and its effects on empathy, resilience, and moral development helps us recognize the common humanity in all of us. The person struggling with relationships, the child acting out aggressively, the adult who can't seem to bounce back from setbacks. We're all operating from internal working models shaped by our earliest experiences of relationship, but we're not trapped by these early experiences. Every moment offers the possibility of new relational experiences that can gradually update old patterns. Every attuned interaction, every experience of being seen and valued, every opportunity to successfully cope with challenge, these all contribute to ongoing development throughout life. As we conclude this exploration, I invite you to reflect on your own journey. How have your early relationships shaped your capacity for empathy, your resilience in the face of challenges, your sense of right and wrong? Understanding these connections isn't about blame or dwelling in the past. It's about recognition, compassion for yourself and others, and the possibility of continued growth and healing. The research we've explored today ultimately reveals that we're all interconnected in ways we're only beginning to understand. Our mirror neurons literally allow us to feel what others feel. Our attachment relationships shape not just our individual development, but the kind of society we create together. Our capacity to provide secure attachment for the next generation depends on our own attachment experiences and our willingness to reflect on and heal from our own wounds. Thank you for joining me on Strides to Solutions. Remember, the capacity for empathy, resilience, and moral behavior isn't fixed. These capabilities can be developed and strengthened throughout life through healing relationships, meaningful connections, and the courage to remain open to growth. Your attachment story, whatever it may be, is still being written. And in understanding these profound connections between early relationships and lifelong development, we all have the opportunity to contribute to healing both our own and others.